Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. This is Good Morning Black People with Morgan Rees. And I am your host, Morgan Rees. How are you guys doing today on this fantastic, fulfilling, amazing Friday? It's the end of the week, guys, and it's time to relax and enjoy your weekend. Well, today, guys, I have an amazing special treat. I am bringing to you the amazing Bobbi Booker. She's an award-winning Philadelphia-based multimedia journalist and radio personality whose velvety voice has been a mainstay in the Delaware Valley for over 2 decades. In 1981, Bobbi launched her professional broadcast career with WRTI as a news reporter, and in 1999 was named co-host of Ovations. Well, guys, without me even saying any more, Philly's own award-winning Bobbi Booker will meet with our special guest right after this. Thank you.
It's Good Morning Black People with your host, Morgan Rees, author, podcasting host, online personality. Good Morning Black People, discussing social views, today's news, and interviews. Subscribe today at YouTube at Good Morning Black People.
Good morning, Miss Booker.
Hello, good morning. And as I would say, black with a capital B, all day, always. So
look, I love that already. I'm taking that trinket.
Well, one of my decades-long battle, and I mean a couple of decades, was fighting with the Associated Press to capitalize the B in black. And you wouldn't think that should be a fight, but it was a fight. And finally, a number of my colleagues, not just across the United States, but in Canada as well, were a part of this pressure movement to force the Associated Press to acknowledge and respect what was already happening in the Black press across both of these continents. The capitalization of B in black was a no-brainer. We see ourselves in that light. The AP's pushback and their excuse was that there was African American, there were other titles, and they were just resistant to the idea. Another part of their argument was that means they would have to capitalize the W in white. We said, we don't care what you do with any of that. That's on you. We're talking about black. What you do with that is what you do with that. But however, there really was no equalization because as it is for white culture in America, they almost always have identifiers that they can lean on. They're Italian, German, this, whatever. So, that was basically a BS argument. So, to our surprise and joy, this coalition of Black journalists, we saw the announcement on Juneteenth of 2019 that the Associated Press had finally changed its mind and capitalized the B in black. So when I say good morning, Black people, I'm saying it all the way and strong with a capital B, all day, all long,
All day, all long. That's right, Miss Booker. Oh my gosh. You said a mouthful. I'm not even going to say anything else behind that. I would like for you to introduce yourself to the world, for everyone who's listening, and let everyone know the phenomenal, amazing, talented Bobbi Booker, who you are, that made you who you are. From my hometown, Philly, all day, every day. So we get mad love. Can you please share everyone who you are and what brought you to this world of being a journalist, a radio host, and your amazing, talented person that you are?
Oh, you're so kind. That's it. I'm just going to go float, okay, with all of those wonderful accolades. And we can never hold each other up enough. That's the reason I'm here. That's the reason your invitation resonated with me, because I'm a part of that whole belief that we have to hold each other up. And you mentioned my name, which is Bobbi Booker, and I lifelong Philadelphian. I've escaped a couple of 4 times, but I've always come back, um, because I really do believe in the mantra. If the real way to solve a problem is to be there and help be a part of that difference. um I am also a lifelong journalist. I started writing at the age of 8, and it was really a part of my beloved, now deceased, father's efforts to give me a way to deal with and cope with the emotions of being a motherless child. I didn't meet my birth mother until I was 13. My father was my primary caretaker. His mother reluctantly relocated from Birmingham, Alabama, at the age of 70, to assist in rearing me. And I have never ever forgotten um, that grace, that I was so fortunate to have these people in my life, because I came along in my father's life when he was in his 50s. So we're talking about older people being a part of my caretaking. And my grandmother, whom I'm named after, the I in my name is for Ida. She was born in 1894. Her grandmother was enslaved, and I've always considered myself honored to be 5 generations removed from enslavement, to have been touched by the hands of a person who was touched by a person who was enslaved, and to carry all of that energy, into the future. That's how I see my role as a journalist and as a media presenter. I'm I'm just a small piece of this dynamic of helping to tell the story, maintain the integrity of this story, and then really pass it along to the future. Everything that I'm doing today is really for those who are going to come along in the tomorrow. And so it's with that sense of purpose that I exist and do what I do. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean it's all serious. I may be a warrior of sorts, but I opened this whole segment talking about a fight. But it does come with knowing how to embrace the joy that this life brings, but never ever forgetting um, the serious dynamics that shaped what brought Black people to this country known as America, and what has shaped that dialogue about our existence here, and still maintains what needs to be a battle. When you look at what's happening in Florida,
Huh.
um, when you look at these new dynamics that are trying to control again our our history, which in our history is American history. That's the other crazy part about this, that you cannot talk about Black people and not speak about America. So, you know, so again, it just underscores the importance of why I do what I do. I'm also an instructor, an educator here in the region. That's a relatively new title for me. I never saw myself formally as a teacher, and so I'm a professor of media writing, and I'm also a student because I have returned to school to get my master's in journalism. And so I'm sitting in class with students who have yet to ever work professionally, and I'm just going. I'm here to learn, and I am learning. It is so good to be around the energies that I'm encountering at this part of my life. Having I actually submitted a resume for a job and had to lob off like 20 years. You know,
Because you know they said you're supposed to go back 10 years. And he was like, well, I've done a lot in the last 10 years.
I'm like, oh boy, let me. So I just said to simplify it, I'll sort of just cut off the first 20. I'll start around 1999, you know, in the last century, which is already its own thing.
Yeah,
So,
because,
you know,
wow.
but that's a little bit about who it is that I am. And I will say this one thing about my father, and I'll mention his name, Benny Booker, who really looked at ways to make sure that I didn't hold on to despair. While my circumstances that surrounded my birth would be considered harrowing, um, he refused to allow me to waller in self pity. And of course, I had a grandmother whose axiom was, idle mind is a playground for the devil. So that means I was a busy little bee.
On
Even
purpose.
when I was a little BB, I was a busy little bee. So I was always involved in events. I learned how to garden as a child. I was always taken places, allowed to explore beyond my neighborhood. And it was all because a Black man saw beyond the limitation. And he came to Philadelphia as part of the Great Migration. So he refused to be limited in the place of his birth, which was the Deep South. And with that in mind, he saw so many options for me. So every time I hear that once a year when everybody is hollering, with MLK, I have a dream. um,
Mm-hmm.
Always reflect that, in essence, I am that dream. I am the dream of Martin. I am the dream of all of my forebears who who would relish this moment, but also understand that the fight continues. So that's a wee bit of what makes me me.
Well, you know what? You are unique on purpose, an individual on purpose. I promise you, Miss Booker. You are definitely an icon in Philly. I know that. Um,
Thank
I was
you.
born in Brooklyn, but I was raised in Philly. So when I moved to Philly, it was in the mid '80s. Yes. So um, all of my kids are grown. So when you said '99, my youngest was born in '97. So
Okay.
yeah. So that tell you, even though I look young, in my mind I feel like I'm younger, but. I was a part of all that. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to pick your brain. You
Sure.
were a part of the Move moment. Remember when
I
Mayor
was
Good?
in Philadelphia uh,
Yeah. I know.
during a couple of the move moments.
Well, we want to talk about that iconic Move moment when Mayor Good dropped the bomb on Osage Avenue.
1985. Yes.
Can
Yes.
you share some of the things that you knew or you had some knowledge of? I know I'm digging. You wasn't expecting this, so that's why I tell all my guests. You never know what I'm gonna pull out of my hat to talk to you about because I was a part of that journey in that world. I actually had a family member that lived right around the corner from that situation that took place. But for coming
Hmm.
to from a journalist point of view or a media specialist point of view, or just a human being, an icon, again, you are an old soul that in a young body. So you were a part of a lot of history in Philadelphia. I want to hear your take and your thoughts and your views back in that time. If you can kind of dig back in that intelligent brain of yours and bring some things to the people for us to hear and learn some about. Because people say move. What was it? Oh, we all people in the South, of course, said we heard about that up there, and they bomb the street or something. What kind of stuff y'all do in Philly? And it's like, we are who we are. That's what makes us who we are.
Yeah. Well, as they, say now, the term is it's complicated. And it is really that way when it comes to move, and especially if you grew up during the era that they existed. And I started out mentioning that I went through um, both bouts of move. What happened in '85 was really a follow up to an equally egregious situation that occurred in the '70s,
Mhm.
um, when the first move compound was attacked and eradicated by the Philadelphia Police Corps. That on the other side of um, um, I think one person, well, a policeman um, died of probably friendly fire, and 9 move members were incarcerated. And the building, which at that time, the house that they were living in was in the uh, it's over there, Powelton Village. That's where it was at. And the next day, Mayor Frank Rizzo, notorious in and of himself, had
Mhm.
the house had the house razed. So the property was leveled. That means all of the crime evidence, everything was destroyed.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
now, when I say it's complicated, of course, when I tell you all of that, you're like, let's go pro move. Move didn't make it easy, though. They didn't make it easy to embrace and love them. While a number, I'll say this, a number of the early move members, especially the foundation members, were some of the most brilliant minds you would encounter. There's no question about that. They were the first in their families to attend college. Which is why they could talk rings around most of those city officials and people that tried to talk to them. They were some smart cookies, but their lifestyle and some of the ideas that they proclaimed, and let's also be very honest, and this is something that has always troubled me, because the person who founded Move, Vincent Leaphart, is non-black, a white man who put together this ideology that was followed by black people. It's by a certain group of black people. So so that's why I said it's
It's
complicated.
complicated. Well, I'm glad you put the disclaimer out there in advance.
Oh yeah, it's complicated because Vincent Leaphart changed his name to John Africa, and he was the one who owned the homes, including the house on Osage Avenue that was eventually firebombed. Um, I say this with the pro and con attached. Move, they were instigators. And I say that because, they knew how to push buttons, and the buttons they were pushing sometimes were the right buttons. There needed to be questions that were asked of our civic leaders about things that were taking place in Philadelphia at that time. That said, they also push buttons to the point of no return, where those same leaders were perplexed in how to deal with them. Because while idealistically, Move had some ideas, I could say this: living next to them wasn't fun. Their neighbors were not very happy with what was happening, and um, um, so a lot of what happened in '85 was under the guise of of the neighbors' constant complaint. And you could only imagine. You've got a fortified house, a fortified. We're talking row homes, residential areas. Middle class regions. People who had Black people who had worked a lifetime to get a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood, and suddenly have a barrage of foul language being shouted from a roof on a bullhorn at all hours of the day and night.
Mm.
Um, Children, sometimes clothed, sometimes not, just running around in the streets. And before locks became a fashionable hairdo,
I remember
um,
it.
the Move members, that's how they were identified. They were amongst the first people in the Philadelphia area to have locks. The only people you would see come through Philly that would have locks would be like artists and musicians and folk like that were kind of on the more worldly tip.
Now
And
you say it, I believe I remember that now.
That's right. Move had and it was called that. It was like it was a move style. It was a move hairstyle. People didn't call it dreadlocks. They said, "Oh, you got that move hair." That's what they, you know. Um, so it was something that was challenging to Black people in Philadelphia as well. It's like it was a love-hate relationship. But all of those challenges came to a forefront when the first Black mayor of Philadelphia made that decision to authorize the bombing of that home. Um, it was an action that not only destroyed the Move residence or headquarters as it was known, it also destroyed the 60 plus other homes on that block and the adjacent block. It was a fire that was allowed to rampage out of control for hours.
I remember.
Um, it sadly resulted in the death of at least one individual and the emotional and physical scarring. If you look at Birdie Africa and Ramona Africa, Birdie Africa being the child that was saved out of that, and Ramona Africa, one of the adult leaders, who always brandished her the scars, the burn scars on her arms and neck from that situation, and it also scarred a city.
Yes, I
Um,
remember that. I definitely remember that. I was young, but
it was one of the reasons that I left this city. I could not imagine having a family and raising them in such a situation. But again, if we go back to that, it's complicated, and I had to deal with some things too, like where was my head and heart?
Mm.
And while I tend to travel the globe, um, I had to make a critical decision to come back to Philadelphia because of that aforementioned parent,
Mm.
my beloved father, Benny Booker, who had made this city his home. And I had to really reflect if it's good enough for him and he can manage to get through this, then I can manage to figure out a way too. So in the early 90s, I came back to Philadelphia, which was a, a whole other place.
That's when I was I had my first child in that decade, so I know all about that year. For me at my age, I was thinking I was having fun and being grown, but yeah, it was different.
It was very different, and I came back. And when I say a whole other place, it was you know I would say it was around. It was probably the the end zone of the bottom that Philadelphia had sunk to, because at
Mm.
that point crack had had hit the region. I know crack hit Philadelphia in the late 80s, But by the early 90s, it was a full blown, issue. And it was unbelievable. I came back into, I hadn't been gone exclusively from Philly. I would come back for a visit, but visiting is one thing, living is a whole nother story. And so I looked around and saw just the devastation, um, especially in my community, in the Black community. I was just, I you know I was breathless, but I was also determined. I said, nope. Someone has to stand up. Someone has to talk about the beauty that is still here. Someone has to talk about the righteousness that because there were still people in the neighborhoods. There were still people that were sweeping the streets, sweeping those vials up, still taking care of those family members that had been lost to this, or the family members who had been abandoned by children who were lost to crack. So, I felt it was my role and my duty. And my way of giving back, my strength has always been as a writer and working in media. So that became my purpose, to show that, yeah, you know what? I don't care what you think, we're still here. And then another big part of my self-described agenda was to now tell these stories, to tell the stories of these people, the good stories, not the focus on the crack addicts. Yeah, yeah, we know they're there, and they're with you too. Hey,
That
this
part.
isn't a one-note song.
That part.
you know,
That part.
you
Because if you
know.
look through a glass mirror, there's a reflection back on you as well.
Okay, okay. It's not, you know, um, but my whole thing was to let's talk about the beauty in Philadelphia. So with that, in the early 90s, I was on the scene as a new music genre was launched. When you think about neo soul, which now I hate to say it, neo soul is not a term that the neo soul artists embrace any longer.
Not
Not in the
anymore.
Right. You go to the UK and they're like, yes, we're neo soul artists. But I was on the scene when Jill Scott was skinny and doing spoken word, what you call those, slam, poetry
Yes,
slam
yes,
down on the
yes.
street.
I had the
Um,
opportunity to see her do that in person.
right. Oh, she's a beast. She's a
What?
beast. In
That's why she's
fact,
doing it
when
from
she
Philly.
started singing, I was like, I didn't know she could sing. Wait, we
That
were
part.
almost at each other. Like, when did that happen? um,
Kindred
when
spirit
the
soul,
when the
yeah.
roots were out there and Questlove was beating on upside down buckets
That was my
and
limousine driver days, believe it or not, Miss Booker.
right,
I was a limousine
okay,
driver during that time, believe it or not.
okay,
I worked for
you
King
know,
Limousine, and I was honored to be exposed to those people. And my
you
first
know
time
what
seeing
I'm
them,
talking about. So yeah, I was on the set and
wow,
I was on the scene and I was writing about this great music that was coming out of Philadelphia. And I was sharing. And I was writing, we're talking about, I was writing for zines, when people would mimeograph, they didn't even copy, they would just mimeograph like these
history,
uh,
history. You
these
are part of
words,
history.
pull them together and put them in bars and leave them at clubs. So I was writing for all of these zines, and then and the word got out to New York, and I got picked up by some of the early .com news outlets, Urban Box Office, and all of
Mm,
those things. There was a first wave of online news that got wiped out in the early in the aught. So
I remember.
99 2000 was when things got wiped out, and then they rebuilt all
Yeah.
over again. And I was a part of that too. And, by then, Neo Soul had become its own dynamic. The Roots were big, Kindred, the Family Soul,
Mm,
Jill Scott was
yes.
all over. It
Yes.
was it was just a beautiful thing. So yeah, but again, that
A lot of
was
memories. A lot of memories. Oh my
a
God.
lot of memory, but more than anything, highlighting the flowers in the cement, highlighting the beauty in what was happening here. Because all of those artists I mentioned, they were talking about what was happening, but they also talked about love. They also talked about ways to move beyond, you know, this emotional, social crisis that
Yes.
we were facing. And because they were sharing their stories in the manner that they were also offering a balm to the
Mm,
public, to people who needed to have these elements to help them make it through the day.
yes.
I was just a part of sharing a bit of that story because those stories also helped me to survive and make it. But more than anything, I just wanted to be a part of shining again a different light on the situation that was happening in Philadelphia. And we're in a whole different state of mind. The
Ah,
crisis may have morphed, but we've moved past that point in time. And now here we are 2 decades into the 21st century and dealing with a whole different dynamic. So I'm just glad to be a part of it.
oh my gosh, you make me want to move back home, but I love
Uh,
where I'm at. Believe it or not, I come home to visit every year because I have
okay.
two siblings who I'm guardians over. One of my siblings live in a group home. She has cerebral palsy, and I have another one who has mental health issues. And I come home. I actually was just home on Thanksgiving. I said I'm gonna make my plan to come back home in the summertime because the wintertime. And when I came back since COVID, because wasn't able to come during COVID, and I saw how much the city changed because of COVID and how much
Oh
things
yeah.
were happening. I had family members calling me, telling me this, and I was like, I can't come, I can't come. As soon as I can come, then I'll see. And I went back to visit, and as you said, what it looks like now to me reminds me of how it probably looked like back in the 90s.
Hmm.
Yeah, back
Hmm.
in the 90s. And I was like, I can't really tell too many people about that. I can't take them to this side of town. I gotta take them to the cleaner side. I'll take them further up City Line Ave or further up in Overbrook or somewhere where I don't want to take them to the old neighborhood and
Amazingly, amazing. You know what's really it just blows my mind every day when if you go over to Fishtown,
oh,
what was what was a I mean, you wouldn't even go to Fishtown when I
back
was a
in the day.
kid.
No, no,
Could
no.
First of all, it's not that you wouldn't go, you couldn't go. It was really
I
like,
lived not too far from there before I moved from Philadelphia. I lived
but
on
now
Evergreen.
Fishtown has been completely, I mean, it is not even a shadow of what it was.
I heard.
It is it's a foodie destination. They've got so many great restaurants down there. I mean, craft things, places to go and sit down and have fun, and nobody is giving you the side eye if you're not a part of, because it's a very different dynamic. And
Wow.
it sort of speaks to the evolution of every city. You never, I mean, because if you go back and talk to folk in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, they'd be like, I remember before, you know,
That
20.
part.
Right. I mean, everybody has that story. Now, here's the real crazy and sad part about what I just mentioned with Fishtown, because blocks away from that area, if you get over to K&A, still, you get to Kensington and Allegheny, it is an open drug market. It
Yes.
is, I
So that
mean,
hasn't changed. That hasn't changed.
that, and you know what's crazy is that it hasn't changed, and it's even worse. I mean, I hate to say that, the drug users of my era were a little more classy,
That
but
part.
I'll say I'll say this: they didn't shoot up in front of you. You might have known what they were doing, but you didn't see them doing it. That's a whole different element. And now, the situation at Kensington Allegheny. I mean, it's worse than I've ever seen it in my lifetime. And I make myself go through that area. I'm driving now, but I make myself go through to keep myself grounded because it there are dozens, sometimes hundreds
Mm-hmm.
of drug abusers that are on the streets in varying forms of, whatever their status is, sometimes openly acquiring drugs and always openly using them. And I'm going, but here's the thing. The reason why I drive through that neighborhood, because I will almost always see a household, a man or a woman who is outside sweeping the street, cleaning their front, their steps, making sure their house looks decent, walking their children home through that madness. So and that is what it takes. We have to always remember those silent heroes, the people who will never get the accolades they deserve, that are maintaining because they're, but by the grace of God, they are bringing along that next generation who will see through this and will leave that alone. Will see the error of those ways. And more than anything, it's an indictment on this city because there is no way you can tell me
Hmm.
if if they were people that look like me primarily out there doing that would be allowed to exist. Okay. We also got to call that out too,
That part.
because because there would have been fire hoses. There would no way that would have been allowed to exist for so long. And I'm sure that eventually a change is going to come because it's been way too long. And if you compare that with what we first opened up and spoke about, you know, how can the political ramblings of some esoteric black cult
Hmm.
be worthy enough of having a bomb dropped on it when you've got a whole nother region where hundreds of drug users are openly breaking the law by acquiring and using in a public situation, and that's not addressed. Come on. Yeah, it's ridiculous and it's
Woo.
crazy.
Miss Booker. That's why I brought you on. That's what God connected us. I
It's
promise
too
you.
much.
Yeah, I promise you, because
Thinking
I was
things.
tasked with an
I don't
assignment.
do it. I don't do them because of that.
No, you're never that. That's why I was tasked with an assignment. And when I was tasked with that assignment and I was directed towards you and we made this connection, I promise you, it wasn't my doing. It wasn't your doing. It definitely was not my producer's doing. It was God's doing. And today
Hey,
you shared with us history. You shared with us
hey, look,
amazing
but
treatment.
you know what? You mentioned spirit, and I'm gonna share with you one of the things that I do that also just keeps me grounded. I'm a radio host. I'm a reluctant radio person too. I was dragged kicking and screaming into radio. That's a whole nother story. It'll be 20 minutes. We'll do another show and we'll
Yeah,
talk about
well, we are, because I was going to ask you that already. I'm going to bring you back on. I would like to let you come
it.
back on.
Hey, listen, I'm about inspiring people to just maintain. But I have a program. It's called, and you mentioned Ovations, and now it's Spirit Soul Music because I'm always looking for the spiritual and socially conscious message in the music. And it's a music that we grew up listening to. If you think about Earth, Wind, and Fire, if you think about anything that comes out of the Philadelphia Sound, and think about a family reunion, and and the message that's in the music. There are prayers that these artists included, and if you go back and listen to any R&B and soul record or CD, uh,
We old
I would
school.
say cassette. I would say cassette, but I don't want But if you go back and listen, almost every one of those artists had a spiritual or socially conscious song. If nothing else, it was the last song on their album. Almost always. We grew up listening to those sounds. We grew up listening to those messages. And I feel it's so important to continue to shine a light on those messages. So I have this program. There it is, Spirit Soul Music, Sundays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, it's on replay, so you can go to the website and hear it. And again, just trying to I guess highlight those flowers in the cement, to showcase that it ain't always, it's not always that other, that it's really about the heart, soul, and mind. And sometimes we need to be nudged to that. So that's what I use that program to do, to help nudge people back to a more spiritual center, so that they have the tools they need to make it through this thing called life, because it can be a little tough.
Come back to their roots. Come back to their
That's
roots.
right. That's
Well,
right.
Ms. Booker, how can anyone find you? We already put on your radio show. If they need to connect with you, follow you on social media,
Oh
reach out
yeah.
to you, please share your information. You are so amazing, Ms. Booker. I promise you, I'm so blessed
I,
and
I
humbled that God allowed us to connect. When I come home, I'm hitting you up, girlfriend. We're gonna go out for dinner or somewhere.
you, you've got all the good stuff now, and anybody can reach me. I'm one of those early adopters, so I'm on all platforms at Bobbi, Bobbi, no E, Booker, Booker. So you can find me, and there's that other link that takes you to me. There you go, all of my goodies right there.
We are definitely getting together. I'm gonna make sure I try to do it this summertime and we can connect again. And I definitely would love to invite you back on my show, but I would love to meet you in person. I probably met you in my past and you just didn't know it was me and I didn't know
I'm
it was you.
cousin.
I'm playing it in the atmosphere. We are definitely cousins because I have older generation cousins and we kind of vibe the same way. And I promise you, you're my family line. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna find this out. And I'm be like, look, I'm gonna head up and see my cousin before after I go see my siblings, and we're gonna get together.
Let's be down, because we made this work in spite and despite the challenges. And boy, that's a whole nother story. If the folk knew what we went through to make this happen. Um,
We're gonna talk about that on the next interview when I bring you back on. I am definitely gonna want to stay in contact with you, and I am honored. I am
I
blessed.
am too. And I love this. Good morning, Black people. Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Just whatever you do, make it good.
Oh, it's gonna
That's
always, long as I'm a part of it and I'm the host, all positive vibes, great energy, nothing else less. Any all other stuff, leave it at the door. Because guess what? Dust myself off. How we always say, dust ourselves off and try again. I'm done. When you come back with a better attitude, then we can have a conversation.
There you
Well,
go.
guys, we're gonna come to a close. Oh my gosh, I am honored that we were allowed to icon. She's true history, Bobbi Booker.
Okay.
Philly's own. Oh my gosh, I got chills in my body right now. I'm like, I'm talking to one of my, and we talk about my limousine days and music days. So you already know where I was at. I was driving King Limousine back in the early 90s. Started off with Super Shuttle. So I'm gonna tell you where I was at, what I was doing. Took a sabbatical out of the office, doing me, having some fun and mingling with some good people. So guys,
Mhm.
please check this stream out. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some history, some amazing trinkets to learn about Philly history. A lot of people talk about Philly and they talk about us Eagles fans. We Eagles all day, do or die. It don't even matter. Y'all can hate on us. It don't even matter. We are who we are. You talk about us throwing snow at the snowman, but we also have history in Philly. We have true history, true knowledge of people that don't know about our Black community, the things that happened, that people had misconceptions, and you heard it from the own person who was a part of that, those journeys, those chapters. She was a part of that, Miss Bobbi Booker, guys. I appreciate you for joining my show. Guys, you check in, please look up Miss Booker. Check her radio show out. I done went on it already because I'm in the music. That's how I got some of those music to introduce her. You know I was paying attention. I do my homework. You know we intelligent on purpose. Cousin, you know how we do.
I know.
But guys, thank y'all again for joining Good Morning Black People with Morgan Rees. Again, I am your host, Morgan Rees, and I am here I interview the amazing Bobbi Booker, award-winning journalist and radio show host on WRTI. Please join her, follow her, stay in touch with history, guys. This is an icon. You are a true icon. I'm ready for you to get that award because when they announce it, I want to be at the show at the front row cheering you on, cousin. Well, thank you guys again.
Ourselves, we're gonna make an award.
Heck yes. You're gonna get a true icon award. That's what you're gonna get from my lips to God's ears. We're putting it out in the atmosphere. Thank you again, Ms. Booker, for joining me and for taking out the time out of your busy schedule. So much love. And we will talk later on so we can figure out how we can connect when I come home to visit, because I'm coming to see you. I mean that. You know, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. My action gonna be out of my words.
Oh, and I got you. We're going on a tour and we're going to see some real good things here in Philly. I got some stuff.
There you go. You're going to take me some stuff that I probably forgot because I haven't been home in about 17 years, but I come home every year pretty much. On the longest I had not been home was during COVID. We wasn't able to go and my job, and I was too fearful, so I did not come home. But back on my regular scheduled program. I look forward to seeing you and meeting with you again. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Have an amazing weekend. Love you so much. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Indeed. Thank you.
It's Good Morning Black People with your host, Morgan Rees, author, podcasting, online personality. Good Morning Black People, discussing social views, today's news, and interviews. Subscribe today at YouTube at